Open the door, criminal! The shout shattered the cold night air, followed by the heavy thud of boots against wood. The neighbors were already whispering in the dark, swarming like sharks that smelled blood. The lonely widow, finally caught, they murmured to each other. It's about time she got what was coming to her. Inside, Elena stood barefoot on the freezing floor. She wore a simple gray bun and clutched a frayed, moth-eaten blanket around her shoulders like a shield. She didn't say a word. She just watched them. The lead detective, a man named Miller, stormed in like he owned the place. He was in his 40s, broad-shouldered, with a kind of square jaw that suggested he loved hearing his own voice. His eyes scanned her with open disgust. "Old poor nobody," he announced, loud enough for the street to hear. "Probably running a stash house for the local junkies." The words landed heavy in the room. Outside, neighbors crowded the porch, smartphones held high like torches. A woman with too much makeup and a fake smile hissed at her screen. "I knew they'd get her. You can always tell with people like that. You know, maybe you've been there. Not exactly like this, but you've felt those eyes on you. That silent judgment, that feeling of being invisible until someone decides you're a convenient villain." A skinny officer with a crooked smirk ripped open the closet door, letting it bang against the wall. Clothes spilled out. Simple dresses, worn sweaters, nothing of value. He held up a faded shawl with 2 fingers, sneering. "What's this? Your high society wardrobe." He tossed it onto the dirty floor. Outside, a man with a cheap gold watch shouted, "Probably stole it from the thrift store." Elena's fingers tightened on her blanket, white-knuckled, but she didn't flinch. Her eyes flicked to the shawl, then back to the officer. "Pick it up," she said. Her voice was soft, barely a whisper, but it cut through the noise like a razor. The officer froze. His smirk faltered. The room was chaotic, but her words hung there, calm and immovable. The raid team tore her small house apart. Drawers were yanked out, cushions slashed, papers scattered like confetti. A young officer, all muscle and ego, kicked a wooden chair over. "Look at this dump," he laughed, his voice dripping with contempt. "Who lives like this?" Another cop, holding a chipped mug, sneered, "Did you steal this from a charity bin?" "Probably hiding drugs in the walls," the man in the flashy jacket yelled from the porch. Elena pursed her lips. She didn't answer. She didn't move. But her eyes tracked them, counting every step, every violation. Creak. A floorboard groaned under the heavy boot of an officer near the sofa. He stopped, looking down with a greedy grin. He pried the loose board up with the toe of his boot. Dust puffed up into the air. "Jackpot," he barked. But there was nothing there. Just dark, empty space. "What? Hiding your millions underground?" The other officers roared with laughter. The neighbor with the phone zoomed in. "She's got nothing but dirt," she narrated cheerfully. Elena took one step forward, just one, and pressed the board back into place with her bare foot. She never broke eye contact. The laughter died down. For a split second, her silent defiance filled the room. In the corner, a small side table held a single picture frame, knocked over by a careless elbow. It showed a younger woman smiling next to a man in a crisp military uniform. A nervous-looking officer picked it up, squinting. "Who's this supposed to be?" "Your imaginary general." He tossed it back onto the table with a clatter. Elena's hand twitched, reaching out, but she stopped herself. She walked over and straightened the frame with a gentle, deliberate touch, her fingers lingering on the glass. "She's making it all up," a shrill voice from outside cried. Detective Miller stood in the center of the room, hands on his hips, barking orders. He loved this, the power, the fear. He turned to Elena. "You got something to say, or are you just gonna stand there like a ghost?" Elena looked at him. Her gaze was so direct it made him shift his weight. "That plaque," she said, nodding toward the wall where a flashlight beam was dancing. "It's real." Miller snorted. "Sure it is. Probably bought it at a pawn shop." The officers laughed again. One of them kicked a pillow across the room. The neighbor with the phone whispered to her live stream, "She's delusional. Thinks she's somebody." And here's the thing you might not realize yet. She wasn't trying to convince them. She wasn't begging. She was waiting. Because the truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs time. The air grew thicker when a middle-aged neighbor with a beer belly leaned through the doorway. "You always acted like you were too good for us," he slurred. "Living here like you're royalty. But look at you now." He gestured at the mess. The skinny officer picked up a worn book from the floor. "A diary. What's this?" "Your secret plans to scam the welfare office." He ripped a page out. Elena's eyes flickered. "That was my husband's." The room paused. The weight of her words sank in, but the neighbor just laughed harder. A faint hum came from the kitchen, the refrigerator kicking on. "Check the kitchen," the man with the slicked back hair yelled. "Bet she's got stuff hidden in the freezer." An officer stomped over, yanked the fridge open, and found nothing but a carton of milk and some leftovers. "Nothing here but poverty," he muttered. Elena's fingers curled tighter around the blanket. Her eyes locked onto the nervous officer holding the flashlight. The beam had settled on a small wooden plaque mounted on the wall. It wasn't big, but it was heavy with meaning. Gold and silver caught the light. "General Edward Alvarez." "Sir," the nervous officer said, his voice dropping. This looks legit. Military. High rank." Miller's face twitched, but he waved it off. "Fake junk. Just like everything else." He turned to Elena, mocking. "You expect us to believe you're connected to a general?" "You," Elena said. The room went silent, waiting for her to break. She didn't. "Believe what you want." Outside, a car drove by, headlights sweeping across the walls like searchlights. Elena's shoulders tensed for a moment, reminding her of the old sedan Edward used to drive. The nervous officer noticed the shift. He lowered his flashlight. "Something isn't right," he muttered. Miller didn't hear him. He was too busy yelling about finding the evidence. Elena moved then, slow and deliberate, toward a small wooden box on a high shelf. The officers ignored her at first. They were too busy destroying her life. She opened the box, revealing a stack of papers tied neatly with string and sealed with red wax. "What's that?" the nervous officer asked, his voice high. Elena didn't answer. She just held the box. In the chaos, a small notebook fell from the shelf, landing open on the floor. The skinny officer picked it up. It was a list. Dates, names, military codes. He stopped, his sneer fading as he read a line aloud. "Operation Secure. Alvarez, Chief of Logistics." He looked up at her, pale. This is you." Miller snatched the notebook. "Means nothing," he spat, tossing it onto the table. But his hand hesitated over the wooden box. "Give me that." He grabbed it from her. As he rifled through the papers, his eyes went wide. These were classified military files. Maria Alvarez, legal spouse of General Edward Alvarez, logistics security clearance. "Sir," the nervous officer whispered, leaning over his shoulder. That's a real seal." Miller's jaw tightened. "So what? She's still nobody. If you were a general's wife, why live in this dump?" A breeze drifted through the cracked window, stirring a curtain to reveal a faded flag pinned to the wall. A blue star service banner. One gold star in the center. The bulky officer noticed it and reached out to touch it. Elena moved, fast and silent, placing herself between him and the flag. Her eyes bored into his until he stepped back, hand dropping. "That's a gold star," the nervous officer whispered. "Her husband." Elena turned, adjusting the curtain. Her silence was louder than any scream. "Would you like to keep searching?" she asked. The room went still. Even Miller paused. A nosy neighbor, the heavy-set woman, leaned in closer with her phone. "I've lived next to her for years," she narrated, "always acting sneaky." Elena glanced at her, and the woman faltered, stepping back. Elena reached for a small key on a chain around her neck. She didn't use it, just held it. The tension broke when Miller laughed, a harsh, forced sound. "You're just a widow. Your husband is dead. You have nothing." "Yeah, nobody cares about an old lady," the young cop added. "You're just taking up space." Miller leaned in close, his breath hot on her face. "Keep talking, lady, and we'll fabricate charges. You'll wish you stayed quiet." Elena didn't blink. She looked at him with eyes like steel. An officer rummaging through a drawer pulled out a worn Bible. "Think prayers will save you," he laughed, tossing it. A loose page fluttered out, a handwritten note from Edward. Elena knelt and picked it up, folding it gently into her pocket. Crack! An officer forced open a locked drawer in the hallway. He pulled out a faded letter with a pentagon seal. "Sir," he said, shaking, "this is addressed to her." Miller grabbed it. "To Maria Alvarez, for her service." He stopped. "This is fake," he said, but his voice cracked. "Read the rest," Elena said softly. Miller crumpled the letter, but everyone had heard. Elena reached for her old flip phone on the table. She dialed a short number. "This is High Command. State your emergency." "Police have invaded my home," Elena said, her voice steady. "Hold the line." Seconds later, Miller's radio crackled. A sharp voice cut through the static. "All units, stand down immediately. Withdraw now." Miller's face went white. "Sir, there's been a mistake." "Now!" The officers scrambled. The nervous one dropped his flashlight. The bulky one backed toward the door, muttering apologies. "Please, don't report us. I have kids," the young cop begged. Elena didn't answer. She stood there, phone in hand, watching them squirm. As they stumbled out, one tripped, scattering old envelopes. Elena bent down to pick one up. It was addressed in Edward's handwriting. She pocketed it, ignoring Miller's desperate pleas for forgiveness. She walked to the shelf and picked up a small recorder. She pressed play. Every insult, every threat, Miller's cruel laughter filled the room. She connected it to her phone and hit send. Within hours, the story broke. Police raid General's widow's home. Miller was suspended by morning. 2 officers were fired. The neighbors' live streams backfired spectacularly. The internet tore them apart. The man in the flashy jacket lost his sponsorship. The blonde woman's friends stopped calling. Elena didn't say a word to the press. When a news van pulled up, she opened the door just enough to say, "Let the truth speak." The next day, Miller returned, in civilian clothes, desperate. "Nobody respects you," he screamed from the street. "You're living in a dead man's shadow." The neighbors gathered again, hoping to see her break. "Her pride will eat her alive," the old man with a cane muttered. Elena stood in her doorway, silent. Then a black car rolled up. General Marcus Tate, Edward's old comrade, stepped out in full uniform. The street went dead silent. He walked up to Elena, ignoring the crowd. "As of today," Tate announced, his voice booming, "Maria Alvarez is an honorary military advisor." The neighbors froze. Miller stumbled back. Tate shook Elena's hand. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. She just turned and walked back inside, leaving them all in the dust of their own shame. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to fight to win. Sometimes, you just stand your ground and let the truth do the rest.